Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you in-depth discussion with leading experts every weekday here on Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up today, President Trump says he's very serious about annexing Greenland. We ask, where does that leave Denmark, Europe and the NATO alliance? All the while, a developing situation in the North Atlantic where the US has been carrying out operations to seize a Ghost Fleet ship. We'll have more on that. Plus, we'll also be speaking to a former CIA station chief in Caracas and asking him, why has Venezuela been such a thorn in the side of so many US administrations? Hello and welcome to the program. The United States is once again signaling strong interest in Greenland and does not appear to be backing down. President Donald Trump says that Washington is considering all options to acquire the territory, including military action, arguing that the US needs Greenland for national security. Well, European leaders have pushed back, rallying behind Greenland as US pressure grows. American officials, meanwhile, saying that rivals, including China, are seeking a greater military presence in the region, arguing that if anyone is to hold influence there, it should be the United States. Well, let's listen to what Senator Lindsey Graham had to say.
I don't think they're objecting to building up Greenland. I'm not saying we're going to go take over Greenland. I'm saying we're going to build up our military presence, and we need to create a new relationship between the United States and Greenland. Greenland is a strategic point. We need to have the legal control and the legal protections to justify building the place up and putting our people on the ground. You can't have it both ways. You can't have America come in and say, man, you need to help us combat the Arctic threat. And when we do, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. So this is all about negotiations. If you want a bigger presence in Greenland militarily, which everybody seems to do, and you want it to be American, which I do, then you need to look at the relationship between us and Greenland before we spend a bunch of money and put our troops on the ground.
Well, we can speak now to Jim Townsend, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Europe and NATO Policy, who served under President Obama. Jim, Happy New Year, and thank you for joining us once again here on Al Arabiya English. Always great talking to you. I'd just like to start by asking you about President Trump's intentions here and where things could head to. I mean, is he serious, do you think, about using force over Greenland, or is this somehow coercive rhetoric aimed at extracting some concessions from Denmark?
Well, I think it's all the above in a lot of ways. He is using coercive language much more now since the Venezuela experience. He seems to have I call it a bloodlust, if you will, but he certainly seems to have a desire to take the experience of Venezuela and applying it elsewhere, whether it's Cuba or Colombia, or Mexico, but particularly Greenland. I think he looks on Greenland as something whose time has come as far as doing something about the relationship between the U.S. and Greenland, and whether it is a military type of thing or whether it is a political coercion or buying it, which Marco Rubio has said they want to do. It looks like it's Greenland and Denmark's time under the microscope.
Right, but I mean, there has been a backlash from a number of key U.S. allies. I mean, do you think President Trump could perhaps be persuaded to back down on this one?
I don't think so. I think you're right about the backlash. It's reached a fever pitch this morning, certainly on American media and on the Hill. I think this is Capitol Hill in our Congress. I think there is certainly a backlash that's happening just from this rhetoric. The statement released by the NATO members yesterday was a major event. I don't think it's quite appreciated by a lot of people. The idea that those nations felt that they needed to do this, that they needed to put together a statement that warned off the United States in diplomatic language, but warned off the United States from attacking a NATO ally was extraordinary. So there's a great concern about this. But even so, I don't see the president backing down. What option he chooses, we're going to have to wait and see. Certainly the one that is most helpful would be to work with Denmark and to work with Greenland and to fix the problem that way and to get the military out of this.
Right, because the Danish Prime Minister seems to be saying that, you know, NATO's future is on the line here. I mean, the US threatening military action against Greenland obviously draws NATO member Denmark into this matter. And where does that leave, for example, Article 5 of NATO? It becomes pretty meaningless, doesn't it?
Well, it's a horrible thing, and I think just the prime minister was exactly right to say that this would be the end of NATO, and but the way that would happen is NATO is built on trust between us, all of us. It's built on shared values that we have. There's a unity that this helps to propel, that keeps NATO together and moving forward together. If that is impacted and destroyed, where we can't, within the alliance, they can't trust the leader of the alliance, then that's going to undercut NATO completely. Article 5 notwithstanding. I mean, this is something that certainly in the Kremlin, there will be a lot of celebrations that, in fact, another wedge has been put into between the relationship of Europe and the United States, and it was done at our own hands.
Right. I mean, sort of a Christmas gift, perhaps a Russian Orthodox Christmas gift for the Russian leadership in the form of, you know, a self-inflicted blow, potentially a fatal blow to NATO. I mean, do you think there is a plausible scenario here in which this dispute actually spirals into an armed conflict between NATO allies?
No, I hold out hope and hold out the feeling that wouldn't happen, that would not happen, that there would not be a military conflict of any type between the U.S. and Denmark, for instance. But there could be some other embarrassing, awful things happening where the Danes feel they're coerced by a stronger nation, that they are forced into making a decision against their interests or against the interests of the Greenlandic people, that there is a horrible case of bullying here, shoving by the United States against Denmark, saying, get out of our way, and something, a fait accompli happens, or something is forced on these two nations, Greenland and Denmark. That is horrible to see, and that is not the American character. That would be terrible. A military conflict I don't worry about as much as I worry about this other.
Right, and Jim, as you said at the beginning, you know, this is very much a key topic of discussion in the United States right now, presumably generating a lot of media coverage as well. I mean, does that constrain President Trump, domestically speaking? And really, as an extension of that point, is there any opposition to President Trump, any audible opposition to President Trump with regards to military action against Greenland and, by extension, Denmark?
Well, there is a lot of rhetoric and criticism about Trump, about the idea of the military being involved. There's a lot of that on the air today, for sure. You hear it in the Congress as well. This is something that is growing. I don't think it impacts Trump so much himself. I think he feels that he knows what's best. He's got interests and that are number one that he wants to satisfy. He feels this is also best for the United States, I guess. And so he leaves it up to Marco Rubio to go on camera and to go into the Congress and try to dress this up into something that is softer and more palatable. And so he feels personally, the president doesn't feel that he's going to be impacted. He's not going to run for president anyway, as you know. This is his second term. So he, I don't think that really turns him, particularly if he's got Marco Rubio going out and saying, look, it's not what you think it is.
Okay. I mean, what do you think the attraction of Greenland is to President Trump specifically? I mean, is it about Arctic access? Is it about the minerals? Is it about military positioning? Or is it something else? What would you say is the key overarching attraction as far as the president is concerned?
Well, I think it is those things, but I think it is particularly this idea of, in his mind, that there's a legacy aspect here. You know, that he could add to the territory of the United States. that this makes him look like a great leader and a great president, that he is bringing into the United States more geography. I think that's part of this, and you don't hear this a lot. You hear about the minerals and keeping the Russians and the Chinese out. I think there's certainly that, but I think in terms of Trump himself, and I can't guess his mind, but I think he also must look on this as a self-aggrandizement type of thing, where he's going to look like a great leader by bringing in and changing the maps in terms of the United States to include Greenland. I think that's something that feeds his ego.
Right. You think it's a prestige issue, and certainly he seems to be nudged by Stephen Miller's wife, who put that famous message out on social media with a map of Greenland with the US flag over it right after Venezuela, with the word soon, sort of nudging him along there. So I wonder if you think, in fact, achieving that and adding to US territory would actually give him a bump in the polls, and would that be looked upon favorably by people in America?
I don't think so, because I don't think that can happen without a great scream coming out of a lot of countries that we care about and we respect their views. You'd have the Greenlandic people saying, we don't want to be Americans. We don't want to. I think it would be accompanied by such an outrage by people that the American people regard. I think the American people hearing Greenlandic people saying, you're forcing us into your country, or hearing allies very, very bluntly saying, you've attacked a NATO ally. I think the outrage that would rise up from the transatlantic community and from the Greenlandic people would have a major impact on what the American people think, because there's no one in the United States that I've talked to who wants Greenland. This is all a Trump thing. He wasn't elected to bring in Greenland. This isn't like achieving, the liberty of a nation that's under the thumb of a dictator, and you could see the U.S. role as being as a liberator. That's not what this is at all. And I think the American people, when they hear the screams coming from overseas, will turn around and go, what have we done?
And where do you think we are? I mean, if the United States says, military options are very much on the table if necessary, I mean, do you think there are people, as we speak, in the Pentagon drawing up plans?
Well, the Pentagon, half the Pentagon does plans. And I think the political appointees there, the Secretary of Defense and his people, have probably turned to the military and said, plan for something. This is something that the military doesn't wait to be told. They are doing they do this kind of thing. So probably there is something there. Does the military like this? I would doubt it. Do the planners putting this together like doing this? Do they think this is something great? I would doubt it. I think they're shaking their head going, this is horrible. So they might be doing it under duress. But in terms of an actionable plan that the military is training for, the military wants to do, this is something that once again has the U.S. in the role of the cavalry coming to the rescue. That's not what this is. And I'm sure the military is very aware of that and is hoping that nothing like this comes about.
And just lastly, Jim, I'm wondering how you think all of this is being viewed by Beijing and Moscow, which we've already touched on briefly. I mean, does it look to them, this kind of threatening of a sovereign state, as perhaps a green light for some of their territorial ambitions?
Well, I don't think either needs a green light. I think they have their own light system, and when their light turns green, they're going to go. But I think you're right in the sense that this certainly gives them justification that they could use if they want to. They will certainly be happy to tell any critics after they go into Taiwan or into the Baltics, well, the Americans have done this, we can too. But I don't think they need that. I think they're going to take action when they are ready and when they feel the time is right. But I think one thing though is important is that in the Kremlin, in terms of the Russians, they are probably just amazed that the Americans are splitting off the U.S. and Europe with this Greenland as a wedge. They are just saying we couldn't have done this better ourselves. And they are probably trying to figure out, so what do we do now? We Russians, how can we take advantage of this situation that we didn't think would happen? And now how can we make use of this in the best way possible for our own ends?
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there because we're out of time, but really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us, Jim. Jim Townsend, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for European and NATO policy. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
Now we're going to turn to the latest from Venezuela. And the US head of Homeland Security says the Coast Guard has carried out back-to-back boardings of two so-called Ghost Fleet ships and has now seized a second tanker in the Caribbean after saying it started an operation to seize a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the North Atlantic. This after it evaded a partial blockade around Venezuela. Well, the US says the tanker is part of a so-called shadow fleet carrying oil for countries such as Venezuela, Russia and Iran in violation of US sanctions. Well, the tanker is reported to be nearing Iceland's exclusive economic zone. Meanwhile, the United States is reportedly pushing the oil-rich nation of Venezuela to cut ties with China, Russia and Iran and to work exclusively with Washington on oil production. Well, President Trump has announced that up to 50 million barrels of sanctioned Venezuelan oil will be sent to the United States. Well, taking to social media, he said that the oil will be controlled by him to ensure that it benefits both Americans and Venezuelans. Well, how this plan actually will play out remains uncertain, and Venezuela's interim government appears to be resisting. Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Rick De La Torre, who's a former CIA station chief for Venezuela. He joins us now from Washington. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Rick. You, of course, as I said in the introduction, served in Venezuela, and you're quoted as having described the US capture of Nicolás Maduro as, quote, one of the greatest military operations ever conducted. Do correct me if I'm misquoting you there. I'd just like to start by asking you, what went through your mind as you watched these very dramatic events unfolding in the early hours of Saturday?
And it made me wish I hadn't retired when I did, that I would have stuck around for another year or so instead of retiring. And you quoted me correctly. It truly is one of the most brilliant, successful operations, if not the most brilliant and most successful operation in the United States, or I'd even argue perhaps any military out there has ever conducted. I mean, think about it. We traveled thousands of miles. Within moments, decimated and destroyed all the Russian and Chinese surface-to-air missile systems and defense systems. Landed on this fortress of a house, and within moments had them in handcuffs back on the aircraft. And exited the area with no casualties on our side, and then within hours had them before a judge, a magistrate in the state of New York. That is something that no other government, no other military on this planet can actually do.
I mean, during your time in Caracas, I mean, did you ever see the day or imagine the day that Nicolás Maduro was removed from power and sort of physically extracted, as you've just described there, from Venezuela?
Well, there's no way for me to have predicted the events as they unfolded. But yeah, I mean, certainly, for sure. I mean, for years, I think we've been leading up to this event in one way or another. I'm kind of disappointed it really took this long. It took the will of this administration to actually carry out on the prosecution of this case, and to honor what our court systems here had already determined, that he needed to come before a judge and stand trial for leading a narco-terrorist organization. Make no doubt about it. He was never a legitimate leader of Venezuela. He just had this thin veneer of a state that allowed him to basically run a criminal enterprise where he and those within his immediate inner circle became billionaires. I mean, multi-millionaires, billionaires. In a way, on the backs of starving Venezuelans.
Right. So during your time in Caracas, I mean, presumably you were aware of this narco trafficking activity. And I just want to ask you, on what sort of a scale, and what did you actually see by way of evidence that that was indeed directly linked to Nicolás Maduro?
Well, I mean, not just me. I think anyone who was either in Venezuela or outside Venezuela, certainly in this hemisphere, was perfectly aware of his relationship with a number of gangs and Colombian terrorists that were living and being sheltered by him in Venezuela. Along that border with the country of Colombia, he took in hundreds and hundreds of Colombian dissidents, rebel groups, Marxist communist groups, and sheltered them, provided them the opportunity to work with his military and the folks closest to him, with the understanding that they would help in the logistics and manufacture and transportation of drugs, to not just North America, but also to Europe and elsewhere throughout the world. And from that, he would personally benefit. So that I mean, there was never any doubt about any of that, and I'm very, very confident that the evidence that will be put forth in his upcoming trial will show those direct links through testimony and through hard facts.
Right. So, Rick, just to clarify here, you would say that Venezuela under Nicolás Maduro was a narco state, and that he was the kingpin.
Oh, without a doubt. Between him, Diosdado Cabellos, Vladimiro Padrino, and others, this is exactly what they would do. They stole every possible resource they could, whether it was gold, whether it was human trafficking, the oil itself. All of that stuff was funneled through relatives and shell companies, and then funds moved overseas into bank accounts throughout Europe and Eastern Europe and other places. So that's exactly that model that they ran.
Right, and some of the other places that you haven't mentioned, I mean, Iran, one of them, there are these reports, and I'd love to get your insights on this, that there were not just Iranian, but also Hezbollah operatives, Cuban operatives on the ground there in Venezuela. I mean, what sort of numbers are we talking at, and what were they involved in? What sort of activities?
Sure, so for a number of years, since actually the late 90s, he had a very open door, not even open door, red carpet treatment to Hezbollah, Hamas, in addition to the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranian state itself, the MOIS and the IRGC, and he allowed all these folks to operate within his country with impunity. It served, Venezuela was serving as an aircraft carrier, where all these adversary forces were then spreading their chaos and destabilization to all the other neighboring countries. Now, he himself and his immediate inner circle, they were puppeted by the Cuban intelligence organization, by the Cuban government. The Cuban government's economy has been faltering for a number of years, and is dependent on Venezuelan oil, which it gets for free in exchange for providing security and intelligence services. If you look at this attack, the 30 some odd bodyguards that died during the arrest operation on Nicolás Maduro and Celia Flores, all of them were from Cuba. Right. So right there, something that he had denied for so long, that there were no Cuban military or Cuban intelligence forces working within his country, was just proven right there to be a complete lie. The Cuban intelligence apparatus provided them some of the harshest Cold War Soviet Union type techniques so that he could keep his people in line, so that he could continue to run and manage that repressive regime. And in exchange for those services, they would flood Cuba with as much oil as the Cubans could take. And then what the Cuban government would do is they'd split that amongst themselves, most of it, and just leave a few crumbs behind for the Cuban people. So it is as illegitimate and as illicit as it could possibly get.
I mean, when you were in Caracas, I mean, were you aware of the presence of people that didn't look like they belonged down there. I mean, Iranian operatives, Hezbollah operatives. Did you see them? Were you aware of their activity? Did they have bases?
Well, look, I think if you find any major metropolitan city anywhere in the world, you're always going to find people of different colors and creeds and backgrounds, right? So that certainly wasn't that sort of concern, but it was just out in the open. There was nothing secret about this, if that's what you're asking. There were certainly Iranian cultural centers, which is everyone knows is nothing more than just a base for Iranian intelligence operations. The Chinese government was actively involved in expanding their Belt and Road initiative and having their debts paid for by receiving Venezuelan oil. And then the Russians themselves, the Russians military troops inside Venezuela, and the work that they were doing and helping to build up and sell weapon systems to the Venezuelans. So what I'm saying is none of this stuff was in any way hidden or disguised. He was very proud of his relationships with all these adversarial countries.
So just to sum up this part of the conversation, I mean, which countries do you think are going to feel the greatest sense of loss at the departure of Nicolás Maduro?
Well, I think most immediately it would definitely be Cuba. Cuba has been struggling for so long because of their failed economic policies and their inability to actually produce or manufacture anything that the world wants. They were completely reliant on Maduro and his regime to prop them up. Some of that oil now recently shifted to the very left-wing Morena party in Mexico, which is, for whatever reason, which is completely beyond me, believes and is ideologically aligned with the Cuban government. But that's being closed down too, because the Mexican people are realizing, well, why are we giving our natural resources away to a country that doesn't really benefit us, in any real way? This doesn't make any sense. So I think Cuba will probably be the one that will suffer the most regarding what we just recently witnessed within weeks or months.
Right, and as an extension of that question, I mean, clearly a lot of countries will be watching very nervously what's been happening in Venezuela and wondering, could we be next? I mean, which countries do you think could be on watch?
Well, I don't think it's about identifying specific countries or specific leaders and saying, hey, you're next. What we've had in this hemisphere, right, either rightly or wrongly, since 9/11, we've sort of turned our backs on our southern hemisphere because we were pressed to deal with terrorism on a global scale elsewhere. What that did was that created a vacuum that allowed the Russians, the Chinese, Iranians, and others to fill and develop those relationships and start to play in our backyard. The message here is rather clear to to this hemisphere and its leaders is, look, certainly we welcome all parties, we welcome all types of leaderships, but there's a big difference between being the leader of a country and also cutting deals, being corrupt, and working with the enemies of the United States and running a narco-terrorist state. On an annual basis, I'm not sure if folks understand the scale of damage drugs are happening in the United States, but we lose alone somewhere between 60 to 80,000 Americans every year on drug overdoses that come from Latin America. And there's not one family here in the United States that doesn't have a relative or know someone who has sadly had to struggle with either drug addiction or death. So and that transcends all politics, and that just immediately has to stop. And I think this administration has done that by securing our southern border and now prosecuting its campaign against drugs.
Just looking forwards to what happens next in Venezuela, and again, speaking to you is great because you know the structure of the country and the governance of the country. I mean, clearly toppling the leader, as we know from previous case studies, is in many ways the easy part. In terms of how Venezuela is governed next, I mean, it looks like quite a lot of remnants from the previous administration are going to be there, at least for the time being, not least the vice president, now acting president. I mean, where do you see things heading to?
Well, I'd only point out, we're talking what, it's been 72
4 or 5 days,
hours or so, right? Whenever you conduct these operations, right? And I think the number one thing that we need to focus on is stability and safety for the poor Venezuelan people that aren't involved in the Maduro regime. And what that means is, if once you remove him, right, you need to fill that vacuum with something. And of course, nothing would be better than members of the Venezuelan exiled community, the opposition parties. But the challenge there is that they are exiled. They're in foreign countries. They're not in Venezuela, right? And so someone has to be there the next day to make sure that the water is running and that the power is on and that things continue as best as they can for the citizens for the citizenry. So what that means is that we just have to pinch our nose for the time being and have to deal with some of its remnants until we've got a better handle of the situation. And I think that's what we're seeing now. I suspect in the short term, there'll be some sort of delegation or groups from the United States heading down there to help provide some further guidance and leadership on how to continue to roll these things out. But make no mistake about it, Venezuela is in a much better position today than it was on Friday.
Right, and just lastly, I mean, I'm sure you've still got contacts and friends on the ground in Venezuela. I'd just like to ask you what they're saying. I mean, is there a sense of nervousness, or is there a sense of confidence that now Maduro is out of the way, the country is, as you say, on the path to something markedly better?
Yeah, I do, and my friends that I have spoken with in Venezuela and those in the exile community, there's one constant theme, and that is relief. Relief, because in their minds they couldn't see it get any worse. So they say, look, anything is better than what we had before, because we were starving, right? We didn't have enough food to eat. We had no future. There were no jobs. There was nothing, right? The only thing you did was serve the regime or betray your own values and your own belief systems and become a member of the criminal enterprise, right? So it's a real testament to the Venezuelan people that have put up with this for so long.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us and sharing your insights with us. Rick De La Torre, former CIA station chief for Venezuela. Thank you very much indeed, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's get more now on these so-called ghost ships that the United States is engaged with at the moment. We can speak now to Lieutenant General Russell L. Honoré, retired three-star general and former commanding officer of the U.S. First Army. General Honoré, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And we've got very fast-moving developments at the moment. We've got these two vessels. There's the Marinera, which used to be called the Bella One. That's in the North Atlantic. Now the U.S. says it seized a second oil tanker called the Sophia in the Caribbean. I mean, these are called ghost ships. They're supposedly conducting illicit activities. What sort of activities would ships like this be engaged in?
As determined by the United States government, who's placed a ban on the export of oil from Venezuela on the open market, there are, in the U.S. perspective, there are legitimate legal restrictions on these ghost ships operating out of Venezuela and sending oil, which is the way they do it is one of the oldest constructs in ancient and modern world through contraband, as determined by the United States and the judgment by the U.S. government that these ships should not be transporting fuel based on U.S. findings that the proceeds from those fuels from that oil was supporting an illegal government in Venezuela. All that is very contentious, whether the U.S. has authority to do it, but the difference is the U.S. has the capability to enforce whether this rule is accepted by the international community or not. But by and large, These are questionable acts, but they have been executed. And one of those tankers, as you know, was recently flying a Russian flag. So we're in some uncharted waters here as to where this thing will go in the future, whether the U.S. will retain full control of those ships. The good news is they were taken, according to current news, without any incidents. So they'll have to sort this out between whether Russia will stand up and wanted to retain control of that ship if it's properly documented to be a Russian flag ship. But at the end of the day, the U.S. is declaring this is illegal shipment of oil out of Venezuela.
Right. Well, we've just heard from the U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth saying the blockade of sanctioned and illicit Venezuelan oil remains in full effect anywhere in the world. So he's giving the verbal message, and the clear message is the action taking place on the seas, as we speak. And the fact that Russia has sent a submarine to escort one of those oil tankers, doesn't that prove that it is in fact a Russian asset?
Not necessarily, because you're dealing with two very aggressive governments, the Russian government, which has been sending ghost ships out of Russia since the start of the Ukraine war, and sending oil all over the world. And many of that have been sanctioned by the U.S. and international community, to include NATO, but they still ship oil all over the world. And oil is now a big part of the contraband trade around the world.
Right, Russia seems to be sort of non-committal on this as well. We've heard Moscow saying the tanker was only temporarily flagged to Russia. However, no state has the right to use force against vessels properly registered in other countries' jurisdictions. This sounds like it's neither ours nor is it not ours kind of a message. Is that how you'd understand it?
Yeah, the diplomats got some work to do, and then we'll see how the international community, to include the U.S. and NATO, which are supporting the war in Ukraine, and is this another peg in the increasing tensions between Russia and the rest of the world, and whether the U.S. rules are has been executed by the U.S. government, will that stand up in world opinion? Oil is traded that way all the time, and more in recent years since the start of the Ukraine war. It's a part of the contraband trade.
Okay, given the situation we're in, where we've got, the U.S. operation to seize that tanker or somehow stop that tanker, or one of them, both of them, and a Russian presence as well in the form of a submarine and other vessels as well. Are we looking at the risk, do you think, for confrontation between the United States and Russia here?
I think at the end of the day, this will be resolved, but who knows, some junior officer out in the sea could take action to defend that ship, and we could end up with some escalation of direct combat between U.S. and Russian forces. That's the consequences of these actions. But I don't think Russia or the U.S. A hill they want to die on and start a World War III over one lowly tanker with oil on it. I think this will be resolved one way or the other, is what I'm hoping for. But rhetoric and social media posts could escalate this, and it's not that the two nations would make this decision in Moscow or Washington, D.C. to have a kinetic exchange over this ship, but what could happen by some officer at sea who think his last message was defend this ship at all costs, and we end up with a kinetic exchange or gunfire between Russian and U.S. naval assets. That is what I fear.
It sounds like the operation's gone pretty well so far, from judging from what the U.S. has been saying. Homeland Security Secretary, saying that the operation's been meticulously coordinated. There are these two operations, just to remind our viewers, where the US Coast Guard has boarded these two Ghost Fleet tanker ships. I mean, does it sound like a risky sort of an operation from a military naval point of view, or does it sound pretty straightforward?
Well, anytime you board a ship at sea, there are risky operations. But how the world will see this is the U.S. pirating other people's property. At the same time, the U.S. position, which I can't refute, has been that these ships should not be leaving Venezuela with oil because of the restrictions the U.S. have put on these ships departing Venezuela, particularly in the current crisis going on in Venezuela. And the U.S. had publicly said, we're looking for these ships, we're going to stop them and we're going to seize them because they're improperly flagged. And they are violating the U.S. restrictions to put pressure on Venezuela to become a part of the U.S. domination of the Western Hemisphere. So that is what's happening. I don't think, in my best judgment, that the two governments, again, this is a hill either one of them want to die on or start World War III over two tankers. I think this will be negotiated out and figure out what they're going to do with these two tankers. But this is not an immediate threat to start World War III over, but we should pay attention and people should voice their concern to the U.S. government and to the Russian government that we need a sense of calm here and sort this out diplomatically or in international law as to what happened with these two tankers.
Okay, and just lastly, I mean, the British Defence Ministry is saying that the UK was somehow involved in this operation that included some naval support, some aerial support, some RAF aircraft involved. I mean, is that quite typical that the United States and the United Kingdom would, join forces to some extent and support each other in these kinds of operations?
Absolutely, and that is what we call a combined naval operation going on in that area of the Atlantic. And there's always close cooperation between the U.S., UK, and NATO partners that have collectively said, hey, we're looking for these ships, and when we find them, we're going to stop them, we're going to seize them. So that is all done through bilateral and trilateral and multilateral operations in that part of the Atlantic.
Okay, well, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us. Really appreciate it. Lieutenant General Russell L. Honoré, thank you very much indeed for your time, sir.
Have a good day.
Now, turning our eye to the war in Ukraine, and the UK and France have agreed to send troops to Ukraine as part of a new security guarantee to prevent another Russian invasion. Well, the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer signed a declaration of intent with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the French President Emmanuel Macron at the Coalition of the Willing meeting in Paris on Tuesday evening. Well, public reaction in the United Kingdom is mixed. Let's take a listen.
I think generally we need to support Ukraine in whichever way we can, just to make sure that if indeed there will be a peace deal, we are able to keep that eastern flank of NATO fully supported and secure.
I think there'll always be a problem between Russia and Ukraine. So much bad blood between the pair of them so far. So I can never see peace. And what's the point of a few people trying to stand in the middle? They won't be able to stop them. Shouldn't be the policeman for the world.
I think we should be doing it. I think it's the right thing to do. It's a moral thing to do. We should be standing up for our allies in the same way that I would hope that they would do the same for us if we were ever in the same boat.
Well, we can speak now to Maxim Yali, who is a professor of international relations at Kyiv Aviation University. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Professor. Before we talk about negotiations and what's been agreed in Paris, I just want to start by talking to you about the situation on the ground in Ukraine. I mean, there have been daily Ukrainian strikes on Moscow as well, and we're told that there's been fresh Russian attacks on Kyiv. I mean, does it look to you like, despite all the peace efforts, the war is not just carrying on, it's actually escalating to some extent?
First of all, greetings to you, Tom. Greetings to the audience. Well, actually, yeah, the war is going on, and as President Zelensky mentioned, Ukraine must be ready for any variants of further developments of events if we cannot reach the peace deal, so-called, and agreement with Russia and with our Western allies concerning security guarantees and the conditions of this peace, of course, then Ukraine should be ready for the war. And actually, if you look back to the history, it's always climax before the end. And of course, both parties are trying and doing their best to improve their negotiation positions because the war is going on parallel with the peace negotiations, especially it's a tactic from Russia. We talk about Russia since 2014, before or during important negotiations, they always make some serious attacks on strategic or infrastructure, or if we talk about Kiev or in the other cities and towns all around Ukraine, trying to show that they have power and they can go on as long as possible. And of course, number one goal, if we talk about latest events and months, of course, they want to use the weather, which is pretty cold now, particularly in Kiev, yes, and to destroy our energy grid and to influence the point of view of the Ukrainian society, because still the majority of Ukrainians are ready to fight and do not agree for any territorial concessions, and all that so-called red lines for Ukraine declared many times by President Zelensky. And of course, until Zelensky has the support from the society, he can go on and not to go for compromises which can lead for serious consequences, both for him personally, if we talk about his political perspectives, and for Ukraine and for his presidential legacy. So because the number one goal for Ukraine and for these peace talks is to prevent third military aggression of Russia against Ukraine, just as it took place in 2022.
And I'd just like to ask you about what you have been observing with regards to the dialogue in Paris. I mean, have there been genuine breakthroughs, would you say?
Well, I can't say that there was a genius breakthrough because the problem is, and the main challenge for Ukraine now is not just to make some agreements concerning security guarantees with our European allies, with Great Britain, but the most important, how we'll react, for example, for deployment of foreign troops on the territory of Ukraine, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, because without agreement of all sides, it's impossible to reach the final result, and to sign a peace deal. So actually, I'm waiting for reaction, first of all, of the United States, because as you know, these troops which will be deployed, by France and by Great Britain, they also require security guarantees from the United States. And whether Donald Trump is ready to give these security guarantees, at least to his NATO allies, now is a big question. Not talking about Putin and Moscow, because Kremlin constantly repeats that they will not agree for any deployment of any NATO troops on the territory of Ukraine. Understandable why, because it will be real security guarantees and will prevent the further aggression. But still, I suppose, yes, it's a good step forward, I would say, but still far not the latest one.
And when you look at who's in that room and the sort of language they're using and the exchanges that have been had in Paris, do you get the impression that Ukraine's allies are really completely united?
Of course, when there are more than two parties here, it's very difficult to reach the agreement which benefits everybody. And for example, Italy, it's also a member of coalition of willing, but Prime Minister of Italy, Madame Meloni, repeated once again that Italy will not send their troops. So therefore, I suppose that's the only way and the possible way. For example, even Germany, it's Chancellor Scholz, Merz, pardon me, he mentioned that so far, at least, Germany is not willing to send their troops. But I suppose it's the best compromise which could have been reached so far, and actually the best way. And I'm the most important for Ukraine, at least, that Europe has realized the real challenges for its security, and that Russia may not stop on Ukraine, especially if the conditions of this peace deal will be humiliating for Ukraine, which will be taken by Kremlin as a provocation, just to go further. And therefore, we can see serious agreement, at least between France, Great Britain, and Germany as well, the most powerful countries in Europe, both in economical and military sphere. And I suppose here we have a consensus, definitely, and it's a positive signal so far.
I mean, you sort of touched on this in your first answer, but it looks as though still the outstanding issue, the issue that could derail the whole process of negotiations that we've got to at this point, is going to be the issue of territory, isn't it? I mean, do you see that as still being the area where the red lines simply haven't shifted?
Yes, it is a red line, and it's the biggest challenge. And I suppose that until Ukrainian armed forces control at least 1 square kilometer of the territory of Donbass, they will not retreat. Both, as I have mentioned before, political reasons personal for President Zelensky, for his political ambitions, further perspectives, and his political legacy as well. And as I have mentioned, Ukrainian society does not support any territorial concessions, and unlike Kremlin, and Putin, President Zelensky must and has to take it into consideration.
Right. So in a sense, Ukraine and the United States are not on the same page on this issue, because the US side is talking about compromises on land. I mean, that is not what Kyiv wants to hear, is it?
Yes, exactly. And it's the biggest challenge, in negotiation process between the United States and Ukraine, because so-called this Trump's plan, which was converted already into Zelensky 20 points it's different. And actually, the problem is that Trump is okay with territorial concessions. He is considering from possible economical benefits for cooperation in with Russia, and he is sure, it seems to me at least, and not only to me, that it's just a matter of time. So why not preventing killing more people, etc., etc. But as I have mentioned, now I suppose all negotiations, and with American delegations in Paris as well, that's number one issue. And as we can see, no solution has not been reached and compromise. And moreover, as I have mentioned, it's number one condition for Putin, for him to show that he won this war, to reassure his society, and to prove his statements that so-called all the main goals of special military operation has been reached, because everything started in Donbass, and of course he wants at least to occupy all the territories, not to have any risks, including inside risk. I mean, Russia if he stops before 2 steps before the victory, so to say, because he is criticized by part of Russian society, particularly, and he definitely will be criticized if, for example, he agrees to stop on a battlefield, on the battle line, and until he controls all the territory. Besides, there are some aspects very important for the territory of Donbass, for example, Slavyansk, why it's important here. So there is no water supply in Donetsk, the biggest city of the region, and all around other territories, but just because this water is blocked in Slavyansk. So they definitely need to get control under it because, for example, people in Donetsk cannot go to the toilet. They go to the plastic packets. Yeah, so for you to understand how it's difficult and it's the biggest risks for their lives, they cannot go to toilet, they cannot take bathroom, they cannot prepare food, etc., etc. So now, for example, the biggest challenge for them is to warm this water, which is outside the households. So that's just one of the reasons. Besides, Kramatorsk is very important from the point of possible further aggressions, because if Ukraine loses it, of course, it will be much easier to start new aggression, because Kramatorsk, it's after Mariupol, I suppose it's the biggest city which was under control of Ukraine before the full-scale invasion. And it was very well fortified since 2014, and it will take more than a year, I'm sure, to capture it, because, for example, now Pokrovsk, it used to be 70,000 civilians living there before full-scale invasion, and still they cannot get there and get the whole control more than a year. So, of course, that's why these are the main reasons why the war will go on, I suppose, and we shall see not a single but many rounds of negotiations, both between Ukraine and its European allies and with the United States.
Okay, well, that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Professor Maxim Yali at the Kyiv University of Aviation, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Now, turning our eye to the Middle East, Iran's foreign minister announced that he will visit Lebanon on Thursday with an economic delegation. That's according to various local news outlets. This visit comes after Israel has questioned the Lebanese military's effectiveness and accused Iran-backed Hezbollah of rearming. Well, Israel and the United States are demanding that Lebanon curb Hezbollah's arsenal, with Israeli officials threatening to take action if it doesn't. Well, the Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has condemned Israel's latest strikes on his country, warning that they risk further escalation. His comments came after Israel carried out strikes in southern and eastern parts of Lebanon, saying that they're targeting Hezbollah and Hamas positions. We can speak now to Walid Malouf, who is a former US diplomat who joins us now from Washington, D.C. Mr. Malouf, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. We're in a situation right now where Israel continues to strike Lebanon on an almost daily basis. President Aoun is saying, look, we're doing our best to disarm Hezbollah, but Israel saying your best is far from sufficient. Who's right here?
Well, I'll tell you, you need to look at the Lebanese population. 90% of the Lebanese population don't want war. They want Hezbollah to rein in their weaponry totally from the whole Lebanon. And the United States already have been helping the Lebanese army to implement this progress. But so far, the Lebanese army and the Lebanese government are not pushing enough to do that. Therefore, we have to look at what the Lebanese people want. The Lebanese people, they want stability, they want economic growth, they want security, sovereignty, etc. And the Lebanese government is not able to do it. So we are at a crossroad here where either the Lebanese government need to implement 1701 and Hezbollah alone with it, or it's going to be some responses from Israel, and that is going to be the Lebanese people. So I look at what the Lebanese population is looking to achieve in this opportunity. There is an opportunity for Lebanon. Yesterday Congress have approved a National Defense Authorization Act, putting a condition on the Lebanese army. And every 6 months, there will be a report to the Congress if the Lebanese army is implementing the agreement and taking all the weaponry from Hezbollah and stop this nonsense that Hezbollah is pushing back. The pushback from Hezbollah is behind it Iran. And there is also a link between Iran, Hezbollah, Venezuela, Hezbollah. So there is a mess of support for Hezbollah that is going to make Lebanon pay a big price. Therefore, my opinion is that Hezbollah needs to rein in their weapons, respect the Lebanese authorities, help Lebanon to get back on their feet, and the Lebanese people to be safe and secure for once and for all.
Right. You make a lot of important points there. And one of the things, since you're mentioning Iran now, I mean, it's been reported that the Iranian foreign minister is going to visit Lebanon this weekend. I mean, in this context, where you've got the United States and Israel saying to Lebanon's leadership, get rid of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is, of course, supported by Iran and partly funded by Iran, why is Lebanon receiving the Iranian foreign minister now of all times?
Well, the Lebanese government is in a position where they cannot stop the diplomatic, let's say, the diplomatic conversation between Lebanon and Iran, because for Lebanon's interest is to keep dialoguing with the Iranian foreign ministry to stop their interferences in Lebanon. We don't have a big army like the United States to go into Iran and make the change that needed to be made. So the Lebanese have to negotiate. This is their only way of keeping order inside the country and keeping things moving forward in achieving, because I am sure that President Aoun and the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Nawaf Salam, they both want Lebanon to be safe, secure, and sovereign, and they both want Hezbollah to rein in their arms. But if Hezbollah is refusing because there is a backing from Iran and a backing from other countries that are called the axis of evil, so what can we do about it? What can the Lebanese government do about it except keep negotiating with the Iranian foreign minister about it?
But, I mean, Washington is clearly at a point where it's going to start losing patience, if it hasn't already, with Lebanon for not having fully disarmed Hezbollah. They seem not to be particularly understanding. They want results sort of yesterday on this particular issue. I mean, is there a risk that Washington says, we are fed up with waiting, we wanted results, we haven't got them, and then takes drastic action? And you mentioned Venezuela, but I mean, this administration in Washington means business, and they don't like being kept waiting, do they?
Well, one of the action that the United States took against Hezbollah, believe it or not, is the elimination of Maduro's presidency in Venezuela, because Hezbollah has been having a lot of support from the Maduro's government and from the Maduro's presidency. So this is one down, because now the United States is asking that Hezbollah will be kicked out of Venezuela and stop the drug trafficking and the laundering of money that Maduro used to do or used to help with Hezbollah. This is one. Number two, the United States have already done with this act that I just spoke about. It is a warning that, look, if you are not going to seize the weaponry of Hezbollah in a very timely manner, we're going to stop supporting the Lebanese army. This is already an indication that, you know, they cannot wait any longer, and Lebanon needs to act upon that and see what the Lebanese army and their friends can do. You know, I rely a lot, in my opinion, for the king, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, to play a role in here, because, you know, he is playing a regional diplomatic role that is very important for Lebanon. And the Lebanese should seek the support and help of Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, as we call him. So he could put the proper pressure on Iran, and because he is negotiating also with Iran, he is talking to Iran. He has shown an ability to be the diplomat of the region, and I hope he will put all his way, and the Lebanese government should seek his help to put all his way to at least stop if there is any Israeli war on Lebanon against Hezbollah. So at least maybe they can put enough pressure on Iran to deliver the weaponry of Hezbollah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the timing, and you've mentioned Venezuela, one down for Team Hezbollah and Iran. Of course, Bashar al-Assad is no longer there in Syria either, so that's another one down. Hassan Nasrallah was killed. The group Hezbollah has been infiltrated or compromised at any rate in terms of Israeli intelligence on that group. I mean, there's been blow after blow dealt to Hezbollah and Iran, of course, has its own internal strife right now. I mean, doesn't now look like a moment when perhaps Hezbollah has never looked more vulnerable, and therefore it oughtn't it, to be easier than ever to deal with the group?
Isn't that funny? Blow after blow, and the Lebanese government is not taking the opportunity to finish the job. It's unbelievable. And, you know, blow after blow, and Hezbollah still think that they are winning. This is the sadness of the situation, that they think they are winning, and they are not winning, they are losing, and they are making the Lebanese state a vegetable with their behavior and with their policies. 30 years of their policies, they destroyed the economy, they destroyed southern Lebanon, they destroyed their own community first. Hassan Nasrallah destroyed his own community first. He destroyed the South Lebanon. All this destruction is on Hezbollah and on Iran. Iran should stop interfering in Lebanon, and should Iran withdraw its support of Hezbollah. And you know what? The Iranian people are speaking up. I hope the Iranian people will speak up louder and louder. And you know, the Iran regime is on the list of President Trump. So I think the third down is going to be the regime in Iran. And I encourage our country, the USA, to really change a regime in Iran, because the regime in Iran is the bad seed in the whole Middle East. It is interfering in every Arab country. It is using their Shia community to destabilize several Arab countries. I am happy that Syria is regaining its sovereignty and they kicked the Iranian out. I hope Lebanon will do the same and Yemen will do the same. Bahrain also stood up against them and they kicked them out. So there should be a time where Iran needs to be punished for all the havoc that has executed in the whole Arab countries.
Okay, I mean, just lastly, I mean, given everything you've said, and clearly Hezbollah is not cooperating with these demands that it disarm, I mean, do you think there is a real risk that 2026 is going to be a year in which we see Lebanon once again dragged into war with Israel by Hezbollah?
Well, already it is happening, Tom. Look at the attacks that Israel is doing in southern Lebanon. And I think a few days ago they went to the Bekaa, and they are concentrating, excuse me, and they are concentrating on southern Beirut. So there is a risk. And Hezbollah needs to recalculate their ridiculous positions, and they need to give in their weaponry and save Lebanon another war. Excuse me.
Okay, well, let's keep an eye on developments in Lebanon, but that's all we've got time for. Meanwhile, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us, Walid Malouf, former US diplomat. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you for hosting me. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us tomorrow with more exclusive interviews. Until then, goodbye.